The long-running dispute between Argentina and Britain over a cluster of islands deep down in the South Atlantic Ocean won't go away. And it's now intensified by the discovery of oil in the waters near what Argentina calls Las Malvinas and Britain has named the Falklands. Argentina insists the issue should be on the agenda at the Summit of the Americas as it seeks regional support for its long-standing claim of sovereignty. However, Britain, which has occupied the territory since 1833, says it's not willing to talk, not while the island's inhabitants want to remain British. This month marks the 30th anniversary of the war between these two countries over this issue. America's Now contributing correspondent Daniel Schweinler takes us to the islands to find out what lies at the heart of the dispute.
Today, 30 years after the two countries fought a war over these islands, life goes on. And in fact, for most of the people living here, life is much better. Thanks to tourism and a buoyant fishing industry, the island's economy is healthy. Cruise liners deposit tourists here in the thousands, and for the few hours they're on shore, they spend. But it's the discovery of oil in the waters near the islands that has excited interest and ensured London's unflagging support for the islands to remain British, as well as energising an already fiery debate over sovereignty. Is this Earth Argentine or British? Are these the Falklands or the Malvinas Islands? Should the islanders be speaking English or Spanish? Hundreds of men died and hundreds more are still carrying the scars of a war fought 30 years ago that failed to resolve those issues. Issues rooted in a troubled history and reflected in this windswept, sometimes desolate but alluring land. They're ours, say the British, and have been since 1833. Its 3,000 or so inhabitants, being mostly of British stock, some of them descendants of the original settlers, think so too. Local politician Jan Cheek's family has lived on the islands for generations.
The ideal scenario would be if they recognised that we're a people, we've been here for, in some cases, 9 generations. The Falkland Islands are what we've made them, and just cooperate as good neighbours. I have met very few people from Argentina who would actually want to live here.
The islanders are united in their opposition to Argentina's claims, their flag waving leaving no doubt where their loyalties lie. But over the sea in Argentina there's a very different message. They're ours, they shout. Las Malvinas son Argentinas. Their argument is that they're much closer to Argentina than they are to Britain, and that they inherited them when their former colonial masters, the Spanish, were thrown out more than 200 years ago. Argentina's Nobel Peace Prize laureate Adolfo Pérez Esquivel sent an open letter to the British Prime Minister David Cameron urging negotiation.
I believe the best thing, the most positive, would be to open up a dialogue. It wouldn't solve all our problems, but it's a way of creating a path.
Pero es una forma de abrir un camino. Y creo que hoy la humanidad está en otras condiciones. Necesitamos.
Today, humanity is different. We've got to assume our responsibilities, and people have to cooperate more and not damage ourselves.
Ya hubo muchísimos daños. Cuando uno lee la Declaración Universal de los Derechos.
If you read the introduction to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, it says that we, the people of the world, want peace. We want cooperation, development, and life, not death.
The two countries fought a war over the island when the then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher sent a task force to reclaim them after Argentina, under the military leader General Leopoldo Galtieri, had invaded on the 2nd of April 1982. 255 British and 649 Argentines were killed. Many hundreds more were wounded, both physically and psychologically. War veterans from both sides visit these monuments to the dead that lie scattered across the islands. They relive the events and try to come to terms with what for them and the islanders was a painfully traumatic experience. Jeff John O'Johnson served with the British Parachute Regiment and returns to remember and to find some kind of peace.
We chased them down and they had a 105 pack howitzer and it was giving everybody a lot of grief, and the guys from A Company went in there and hit it, and we were firing from the rocks above Moody Brook and suppressing that gun team, and then it was a charge into Stanley. Now that was all right. We were given an order then to get off the position and get in and help A Company and chase them in as a battalion group, which we did.
Argentine veteran Carlos Mercante was badly wounded in the conflict. This is his second return since the war, this time with his two young sons.
Las islas son absolutamente británicas en cuanto a cultura.
The islands are totally British if you're talking about culture, the buildings, the houses, the traffic.
El tráfico, todo es muy
everything. Everything is very British.
Yo creo que es un británico impuesto.
But I believe it's a Britishness that's been imposed and it's not native.
Si uno se pone a...
But we're talking about the residential areas, about Port Stanley, or what we call Puerto Argentino. But if you go around the island, or visit the mountains, or go to the farms, the people who live there are much more like the Argentines who live in Patagonia than an Englishman who lives in London.
You're listening to the Falkland Islands.
Liz Elliott, now a broadcaster with Falkland Islands Radio, was a young mother at the time of the invasion and recalls some of the events of those traumatic days with difficulty.
They would come to the door and they would knock on the door, and we had it a few times, and you know, the guns were always pointed at you or your children, mainly at the children actually. I know that our house got searched 2 or 3 times just on the first day, and we were taken out at gunpoint and the guns were pointed at our children. My daughter at the time was 5 and my son was 14 months. So it was quite difficult, you know, knowing that that the guns were loaded. Yeah.
30 years on, Argentina is again restating its claim to sovereignty, now using the strongest diplomatic measures at its disposal. The Argentine President, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, has accused Britain of militarizing the region and has taken economic measures to isolate the islands. Still, there's little talk in Argentina about another invasion. The world has changed. Democracy has been restored in Argentina. But the islanders, says local politician Dick Saul, nonetheless feel threatened and are defiant.
I have never found anybody in the Falkland Islands who says that they want to live under any form of Argentine sovereignty whatsoever. And I think that really is a fundamental fact that Argentina needs to recognise. We may be a population of only 3,000 people up against a population in Argentina of, what, 45 million or something like that. And it's time that those 45 million people appreciated the fact that we do have the right of self-determination. We're not a colony.
Nonetheless, Argentina and increasingly its allies in Latin America see British control of the islands as a leftover colonial anomaly. The islanders say that their wishes, plus 9 generations and 179 years of braving the harsh conditions on the land, should be taken into consideration. The gap between them remains as deep and as cold as the seas that surround these disputed islands.
That's all for us this week. Be sure to find us on the web at cctv-america.com. Please join us again next week for another edition of America's Now. See you then.